Nobody likes to have a toxic relationship, regardless of what it might be, right? And I don't think people think about this a lot in terms of the way one looks at their art. I think a lot of times there are some obvious things that we think about. For instance, we think about uh, art as something that is of the mind, but not realizing that it's more physical than you might realize. In fact, I'm going to put together a video talking about this. Essentially, like what it is to me to think about art as a physical attribute, not a mental attribute. But I'm getting ahead of myself, y'all. Let's talk about toxic relationship with your own artwork. This is something that's fascinating to me because a lot of people that I run into, a lot of students, from what I can tell, have toxic relationships with their art. And what throws me off is that I don't think people recognize this. I think people don't see that having this perspective against your own artwork prevents you from making your artwork even better, which could then improve your relationship, right? And just like any kind of relationship, you got to put some time and effort into it. You got to work on it. But but I don't think people see it this way. They look at it as some sort of abuser, you know. So let's talk about it for a little bit. Let's talk about what one could think about when feeling the way they feel about their art and how the art makes them feel. So in a toxic relationship, usually you don't know that you're in a toxic relationship. It's really hard to know, right? Most people on the outside tend to have a better understanding of one's relationship, usually, not always, especially if they're giving a lot of the details. But if there's some obvious signs, for instance, somebody slapping the crap out of their spouse, like that's a pretty obvious sign that you're in an abusive relationship. If they talk poorly about their spouse to others or often or in front of them, that's typically good signs, you know? And so when you apply the same kind of logic to the way you feel about your artwork, you might start to realize you might be abusing your artwork. You might be talking shit about your artwork. You're starting to say your artwork sucks, um, which ultimately is a personal attack. It's like lack of self love, right? And I think it's reasonable to feel this way, right? Because again, we detach our art as something else other than us. But in reality, it is a physical attribute of how we feel, like we're manifested, right? And demonstrated and shown to others. And so if you have a toxic relationship with your art, it's not good. And people can see the fruits of those labors. And sometimes, you can yield some powerful results, like the Vincent van Gogh of the world, where they had a really unhealthy relationship, but they ultimately used it to channel a lot of their feelings. But it didn't work out for that person, right? It still ultimately wasn't the greatest. In fact, I might do a whole video topic about people in our industry that are just sad. I know quite a lot of folks that are not happy. And this has almost nothing to do with their art, even. It just has a lot to do with just how life is. But I think that's a more deeper conversation. And honestly, I'm not qualified to kind of give any meaningful advice. I can just talk to you and we can have a discussion. Um, but if you think of it like this way, like, oh man, like I suck at art. Like every time I draw, it's shitty. Like I don't know how to do this. I don't like you're talking about your art, and you're kind of creating this circumstance that is shifting this idea that there's something wrong with you, but you're just kind of saying it through the context of your art. But in reality, you're just unskilled. And there's nothing wrong with being unskilled. If you're not skilled at basketball, nobody would get mad at you. And I don't think you would get mad at yourself for not being good at a sport that you rarely play. And so if you start to think of it as another person, think about your art as another person in the room. And would you say the things you said about your art, like the mean things and the harmful words and rhetoric to another person, especially if they didn't deserve it, right? Does your art deserve this hatred for being unskilled? No, right? Again, you wouldn't look at your cousin and your brother or your mother or whoever who's not good at basketball like, you fucking suck at basketball. Like, yeah, you wouldn't do that unless it was like playful banter, perhaps. But you get what I'm saying. So if you think about art as another person in the room, and you start to ask yourself, okay, how would I talk to another person? You know, you would be a little bit more kinder, right? You would have a little bit more empathy. At least I would hope you would. I think most of you reasonable individuals would have a lot more uh, empathy and a little bit more patience with somebody. And let's think of it even in the category of, like, you might see this person do something that you disapprove of, right? So I have children. I have lots of kids. I got 6 of them. I'm married. I got a wife. And these are the people I love the most in the world. I love them tremendously. And I do a lot of things for them in the name of them. I try to give them a life that is amazing. And sometimes I do great, and sometimes I fucking fail, right? But sometimes they do stuff that makes me upset. Like maybe they didn't, clean their room. Maybe they didn't do a chore. Maybe they didn't listen to their mother when their mother told them to do something basic and they gave her some lip. Pretty common children stuff. Nothing unique here. Kids do stuff like this all the freaking time. But I get upset about it, right? I get upset. I get frustrated. Usually there's some disciplinary actions. Sometimes, we'll take away their devices, timeouts, the classics. But what doesn't happen is I lose love for my children, or I start to have resentment around being around them. The opposite. In fact, I've been working so much lately that yesterday my daughter, she wanted to watch TV with me. I've been watching this show called House. I think if you've been listening to some of my streams, I've been kind of divorcing myself from watching exclusively just YouTube content now because it's just so clearly polluted. But I've been like watching TV shows, and House has been awesome. I love that show. It's a really cool show. And the whole time she's like talking and asking questions, and I'm just trying to watch the show and work. But I don't want her to leave, honestly. I keep joking with her. I'm like, get out of here, But I don't want her to leave. I actually want her to stay. I love her very much. And honestly, this is a wonderful way for us to bond in a fun way where I kind of act like I don't want her around, but I actually do, And to me, although there's things that happen throughout the day that make me upset or frustrated on my kids' behavior, I want to be around them all the freaking time. I love them very much. And so when you think about your art and you start thinking about like the resentment that you have against your art, like how it makes you feel, like I try to draw this thing and it just failed me. Like I can't draw it. And you get really mad, and you get mad at your art, or you get frustrated with the art, and you start to kind of shift it around. You start to put a lot of these ideas about is it for you, or should you do this? Like, should I invest my time? Like, you start going through a laundry list of reasons and rationale to essentially quit or leave because of how bad you felt at that moment, which is, again, very reasonable and very valid. But I think what ends up happening is you start building a toxic relationship with your artwork. I personally draw a lot of things poorly. I do. I have a lot of drawings that nobody has ever seen. It may appear that I draw pretty effectively, pretty consistently, But a lot of the stuff that you see me draw usually is stuff that I've been drawing for countless years. And there are just some things I'm just better at than others because of this. Because, like I said, some things I'm very unskilled in, and other things I'm very skilled at. And because of my skill in some things and the lack of skill in other things, I have a really good understanding of what's going on, and I have a really good relationship with my artwork. I don't expect of it in my artwork. I don't expect of it something that I know it can't do. Just like I wouldn't expect of my children or a family member or a friend, I wouldn't expect of them something that they don't have to offer. I have a few children who are on the spectrum, and I have a little bit more of a resolve with them than I do with my other kids that are not on the spectrum. Meaning that sometimes my kids will stim or will have perspectives that, or my autistic children might have perspectives that I can tell are driven by their autism, and that they need a little bit more to snap out of this type of thinking, you know? And it's not entirely their fault, but also there are ways to navigate these types of conversations. And honestly, I believe everybody is a little bit on the spectrum. I actually don't believe that there is anybody that does not have some sort of layer of autism as far as we can tell and as described. Just some folks are more high functioning, more high functioning than others. Some people have a lot more going on that makes it more obvious, and others don't. That makes it less obvious. They mask it well. Anyway, but I don't expect my children that are on the spectrum to do certain things, but I give them the right amount of tools to try to overcome them, because I do want them to be able to overcome them. But they just require different tools of education to help them out. Versus one of my kids, he's super smart, just naturally logical thinker. When I taught him how to play Magic the Gathering, like he got it like the first playthrough, and he was like 8. Where it took a while to teach my other kids, right? But then he has a hard time regulating his emotions. Like when he gets really upset, he's like locked into that feeling of upsetness, and that it's a hard pill for me to swallow. I'm trying to snap him out of it, knowing that he's a very logical thinker, but yet when he gets in that hurricane of emotions, he cannot break free, and it is something to behold. And I also have my shortcomings and my feelings of remorse whenever I have behavior I don't appreciate, that I also do. But this is kind of my point. Like, I still forgive myself, and I still have like this healthy understanding of that things like this can happen, and it's not always our fault. And so when I look at people who see or who do this to their art, it's also kind of like a reflection of what they do to themselves, right? Like they cannot break free from this outside of their art. Many things outside of art in their lives, you can see echoes of this behavior. And if you start to realize, if you start to hear me say these things, and you're starting to realize, yeah, I actually do have a really pretty terrible perspective on my art and my art journey, that I'm also telling you that there's a little bit more going on there. And you should kind of take some moments and take a breath and understand that this is happening to you. And it is totally okay. Seriously, it is totally okay to seek out help if you feel like there is more going on there. And like I said, I am not a licensed psychiatrist or therapist in any meaningful way. Maybe I'm an art therapist, but in the same vein as somebody said like art big brother, like I'm just a brother that's like giving you some insight. Or art dad is a very popular one. that's as far as it goes, you know? And if you find meaning and you find an opportunity to get some solutions to these like auxiliary challenges that you're dealing with, that I am not qualified to even give you advice, but the symptoms of being so self-deprecating to your own art as a kind of metaphor of being hard on yourself, just manifested via physically and toxic relationship vibes with your art, then that's awesome. Then maybe we can start to solve this problem. In fact, whenever I start to teach people and I start to see this type of behavior, I always say I'm not going to be critiquing your art anymore. I'm going to be critiquing you. And I always stay within the paradigm of the person. I don't ever go beyond that. But I'm like, okay, what are you personally doing that I can give you insight on and feedback on to help you navigate this? And we just go through kind of like a questionnaire essentially via class. Like I'll start asking them more and more questions about what they think and why they do these things and their schedules and all this kind of stuff. And that is usually the best way I can solve these problems for them within the class. And I just use their art as a tool to give them that self-confidence, to give them that reflection of what they may be doing poorly. This is by far the greatest tool that I can give people, is to just listen and to give them something to work towards. But outside of that, like I have plenty of students that I've encountered that had to go through therapy. You know, they realize I need therapy, and then they go through therapy, and then all of a sudden they become way better artists, and they're super awesome, and they love it. You know. With that being said, what are some of the tools that you can do to try to prevent having such a toxic relationship with your art? And I always try to encourage people, again, to think of art as a kind of like a physical activity, like working out, you know, which again can be another way. If you have a toxic relationship with fitness, totally can happen, right? People have body dysmorphia all the time. This is a very common thing that can happen. This is not kind of what I mean. I don't want you to fall into another category of things to worry about. What I'm saying is, how would you get strong? Like, what would you do to get stronger? Right? Like, if you wanted to get better at doing push-ups, what would you do? Well, you do more push-ups. Right? At the end of the day, you just got to do push-ups. Now, are there arguments? Is there ways to have proper form, better ways to grow that muscle? 100%. But the first question that needs to be answered is, how many sets of push-ups are you doing a day anyway? Like, how often are you going to the gym to do push-ups? You know? And if the answer is not that often, then let's not worry about the form. It's like whenever people are asking the question, like, what brush do I use? Which I'm going to make a whole nother video about. But let's say, like, what brush are you using? Like, what the fuck kind of brush are you using? Like, it's so much better than anything I've ever used. It's like, oh, okay. Is it? Or are you just unskilled and you're just trying to latch on to something else to allow you to believe that it's not you, that you aren't the problem? But if you're like thinking of this in the terms of like athletes too, like what kind of shoes does Usain Bolt wear? One of the fastest runners and sprinters on the planet at the moment. Only if you're an Olympic athlete will this question actually matter, right? Because at that level, every advantage matters now. But if you are a highly skilled, if you're not a highly skilled athlete, then you shouldn't be worrying about the shoes. You should be worrying about your training regimen. And at some point, you might care about the shoes. Like I've been powerlifting quite a lot in the past several months. And I realized that I might need to start getting shoes to help with certain lifts, to help make them actually harder, not easier. And so, but that's like at the stage where I'm like working out pretty much every day. I've been putting some good weight up. So I'm at an intermediate advanced level train or athlete. So it makes more sense for me to start to investigate and invest in this stuff. But I wouldn't have done it in the beginning. Like it's more like, am I even showing up? Like the argument can even be made: should I buy a better camera? Should I buy a better mic for these recordings? And the answer is, nah, I'm good. I might just stay with this mic and set up literally forever and always. I watch like people who stream and they like clearly have the same getup like for years. So it's obvious like if you just build a certain type of content, that's your content. You know, I have no ambitions of going beyond what I have. Um, and so yeah, if if you start to think about kinds of like if you start to think about like how to get good at art as like a physical activity, then you start to realize you just got to train, right? You got to show up. And many of you guys in the comments, which it's been wonderful to read. I've been reading the vast majority of them, especially the latest video upload. I will read usually all of the comments within the first 24 hours um, because it's easier. Like YouTube Studio makes it really easy to just like look at that. It's harder to kind of go back in time. But if you are not showing up and you're not like doing the reps, not getting the reps in, and then you also have this inner voice every time you do work out at art and it's not good, you're just like, I suck, my art sucks, I'll never get a job, I'll never get anywhere with this, like nobody will ever care about it. Then it's like, it's clearly, it's unreasonable, you know? Somebody wrote in a comment, they're like, what have you been doing this for years and you still have no progress? I then like asked the question to them, which is, well, show me somebody who's been consistently drawing like every single day for at least a few hours, every single day for at least 2 to 3 years that doesn't have good work. Perhaps they don't have opportunities. That's a whole different thing we can talk about. And I always talk about you can only control two things: the quality of your work and letting people know you have quality work. But anyway, show me an artist that has barely done this like for a few years, but they were consistent. I'm sorry, not barely, have been putting a lot of effort into this, not barely done this, sorry, the opposite of that, have been really working for consistent years, for a few years on their craft consistently without any good work. If their work is incredible, but they haven't had much of a shot, then typically people just don't know they exist. I regularly get reached out by some sort of content or some sort of contract work. Generally speaking, on average, like once or twice a week. I got literally this morning, I woke up and I got an email from a potential sponsor, like somebody who would sponsor me, like your typical YouTube, like, hey, would you showcase our product or whatever it might be, right? And I read that and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So like it's already happening with my YouTube channel. Now, I've already told y'all that I'm not really interested in doing sponsored stuff, mainly because of the ramifications of like trying to chase that bag, But this sponsor, I was like, oh, maybe there's a thing I can do that maybe I don't really get any money out of it, perhaps. But it's actually kind of cool because I'll have access to this sponsorship that I can use for other things, like maybe reward people for watching my content, right? Like basically, hey, here's a contest. Join the contest. The winner, the sponsor will send you something cool. That's it. To me, that sounds awesome. Right? Because at that level, sure, they might give me some sort of cash for even doing this. But I don't know. I'm more interested in just growing the channel or making the kind of content that I'm already making and never having to bend a knee to anybody, you know? But as I'm already doing the reps, I've counted. I've done nearly a month's worth of content. I've done like 24, 25 videos consecutively in the last few weeks. And I have a list that I've made, and it's upwards of 35 to 40 things to talk about. So I got another month or so's worth of stuff to talk about. And half of those are things that I think are just like they're going to run out, and I'm just going to kind of have to find other things to talk about. This is why I've been asking you guys to give me topics. I'm already kind of preparing for that day to come. I already thought about cool stuff to do in terms of like just visual things that I always wanted to do anyway that have nothing to do with maybe art advice, but maybe I'll just give some art advice anyways in the context of whatever I'm doing there. But it's like a mashup. So there might be some value just to teach you how to do a cool thing. And then I'll also be just talking and giving some good feedback. You know what I mean? But because I'm doing the reps and I don't have a toxic relationship with my YouTube channel, in fact, there was, again, negative comments and negative remarks come and go. Most, like 99% of what I get is pretty freaking positive. And the last two videos that I did got incredible like ratio. And so to me, it's like, this is really healthy for me in terms of how much positivity it is. But I'm also prepared for the day. And somebody mentioned in the comments, like it is inevitable as I become more and more popular. It's just going to be impossible not to get some flack or some criticism or negative feedback. That's reasonable, like reasonable feedback. I don't actually imagine it will all be just like unreasonable. There's always going to be people that might have a different perspective that I genuinely respect and will take it in and try to grow from it. But getting them reps in, because I don't have this relationship with my YouTube channel specifically right now. That's like, I don't feel pressured. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I got to do this before the people get bad, or I better chase the algorithms. Like I'm doing a little couple things here and there. I tried a couple stuff that people suggested. I'm like, okay, let me try that. But it's like organic. It's not like I'm having some sort of self-talk that's convincing me to do one thing or another. I'm just kind of doing it, you know? And it's been wonderful. It's been truly wonderful. And it's been more therapeutic than anything. Like just sitting here talking. I have a lot to say. Just so sitting here just talking, knowing that people are here listening, they're like hanging out, or one of you guys is probably working out. One person's probably drawing along and just really excited to draw along. Well, awesome, dude. We're all in this together then, it seems like. And that's great. That's an incredibly healthy relationship. But I have seen YouTubers, again, in the vein of having a toxic relationship with your art, using now content creation, creating the content. You guys have saw it. I think at the beginning of last year and this year, just a lot of YouTubers quitting YouTube. You see a lot of this happen, especially for those who like make the kind of content that I think is chasing algorithms. You know? Because if the algorithm is not in their favor 1 week, I can imagine the mental toll it will have that will make them feel a certain way about the work that they're doing. And this is a very strong feeling that I have experienced in the past with other adventures that I've tried out. And it's not healthy. It's not good for you, truly. And so for me, I think in terms of just our art, guys, like just talking about this alone, yeah, having a healthy, meaningful conversation with your art, like as if it was your child, as if it was your mom or your dad or your brother or somebody you love dearly in this world. And today it let you down and it did something that you didn't like and you felt betrayed by it. Then have a conversation with it. Talk to it. Talk to your art. So what can we do here to like reconcile this situation? And usually it would just be studying, practicing, maybe doing morning warm-ups, spending more time with it, just like you would in a typical relationship. Talking to your art doesn't mean like literally just talk to it, but like action, have some sort of action attached to what it means to become a good artist. Again, I think a lot of folks get really hung up on the simple fact that they're not as good as they want to be, and they really start to build this resentment, and it's just unnecessary. Truly, you guys are all awesome. I truly believe in everyone's ability to freaking become incredible people at their art, but they just get so mean with themselves. And again, I'll do a whole nother video talking about how people just are very sad in their lives, and I think their art and their inability to do things that they were hoping to do makes them pretty upset. And I want to talk about that. But for me, I feel very fortunate that I don't have this. I feel I love making art. I'm almost never like, oh no, I gotta draw again. Like usually it's just like work stuff that might make me feel this way, but that's just work. And even still I do it because it's work. It's like that's what makes a person professional, is just do your work. You know what I mean? And so to me it's very obvious that if you do have these feelings, that you'll have a harder time, but I just don't, you know. I get very excited to draw, and whenever I encounter something that makes me feel bad about what I've done in my artwork, I have the opposite approach. I don't get upset. I like double down. You know what I mean? I absolutely double down. And because of that doubling down, what ends up happening is that I get really good at the things that I wasn't good at. I just go hard. And I think that a lot of times people, when they feel like they're doing a bad job, they'll they'll quit instantaneously. And it's an unfortunate consequence. Sorry, I'm trying to think of what else to put on this thing to make it feel cool. There's a bird outside too that's been distracting me. It sounds like a car alarm. It's like burp, burp, burp. It's hard to describe. Maybe you guys can actually hear it in the background. It's pretty loud, but I doubt it. I have some noise suppression tools going on in this thing. Anyway, cool little looking robot lady person. I'm always a fan of this type of stuff. Let's do some cool things on this though. Let's put some noise. Add some noise. All right. It's pretty aggressive, but I'm into it. Yeah, it might be too aggressive, but it's okay. Let's just do that. Let's lower the color. Let's put on screen layer. Okay, cool. I'm into all of this. Actually, you know, it's too... There you go. It's too small. I should have looked at it in the context of the piece. Okay, and then let's do this. Yeah, give it a kind of a bit of like... You might not be able to tell in the video. I have no idea. But it's like kind of gives it this like film filter vibe. Let's do a color lookup. Color lookups are basically a way to like adjust your colors and values. And it's a fun way to essentially give this a photographic filter or cinematic filter. And I usually just go with whatever feels good with the piece that I have in front of me. I don't overthink it. Yeah, this one might work, the Kodak. Just so you can see the difference. It just kind of adds a little bit more contrast. Might be too much to actually. Let me knock this down to 50%. Because I do kind of like some of the rounding that I did in my original painting. And then this one, I think we can just knock down to 18%. I don't want it to be so aggressive. Okay. And then let's just go ahead and merge all that together. Let's group this, call that a source, F, and then let's do some, let's do some chromatic aberration, y'all, using lens correction. Ooh, should I add a vignette? Just a little bit of vignette? Let's see what happens if I go a lot of bit of vignette. Nah, a little bit of vignette should be fine. Actually, I don't like the vignette at all. Let's go hard into the paint and just add a double chromatic aberration. And that should feel cool. Let's adjust the values a little bit more to make them feel a little bit juicier. Just a little bit juicier, y'all. Just a little bit juicy. Oh, and let's make this character look to the left, because again, I have too many characters looking to the right lately. Anywho, okay. Hope you guys enjoyed this talk. It was a little bit more somber, but I feel like I got to be more sensitive about this because honestly, I do believe that there's something psychologically happening when you're this self-deprecating and you have this much of a bad relationship with the art you make, you know? And that if I say something like, suck it up, buttercup type vibes, like, I don't know if that's actually an effective tool if I'm saying that you're drowning to learn how to swim. You know, like, let me see if I can help you out of the water for a bit and we can talk about why you jumped in the first place. Like, let's get a more meaningful conversation going on, you know? And so anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this painting. It was fun to paint it, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video.